reframing your New Year's resolutions as day one instead of one day is, I think as we grow and, habit stack and just move forward in life to become a better version of ourselves, the easiest way to stick with our New Year's resolutions, I think, is to constantly be thinking it's day one instead of constantly be thinking, well, one day.
Welcome to another episode of The Financially Free Investor, where you will learn information and strategies on how to become financially independent by investing in real estate, something that is not taught openly in our society today. Financial freedom matters so you can live a bigger life, retire early, and do what matters most to you. Get ready to hear tried and true methods to becoming financially free with your host, Jordy Clark.
Hey everyone, welcome into another episode of The Financially Free Investor. So today I wanted to make just another quick episode. I've got some other awesome interviews lined up, but yeah, it's been the holidays and I have tried to work as little as possible for the last few weeks. So here we are. You get me for another short podcast episode. So today I wanted to talk about New Year's resolutions. It's always interesting thinking about a new year, a new month, new week, but specifically, and I've listened to a few other podcasts in the past, just as I'm getting back into the swing of work and everything that you guys are getting back into the swing of, I'm getting back into the swing of it too. So New Year's resolutions. And the point I want to make here, if you'll just stay with me for a second, is, there's nothing really particularly important about going from December 31st to January 1st. Now, I say that because everyone always sets all these New Year's resolutions and goals, and they want to drastically change, whether that's fitness or financially. And I think I said in the last podcast I did, it's just so many people, those fitness and finances are usually some of the New Year's resolutions that people always set, right? Yet they never achieve. So the point I want to make in this podcast is this can be day one for you, or you can continue saying one day. I was having a conversation with a really good friend. Haven't seen him in person for a few years, but super great guy. And, we were talking and he was just thanking me he listens to the podcast and they've taken some recommendations and they've kind of started down the path of their financial journey, and they're getting a rental property here soon and just kind of setting all the things up. And even myself with Courtney is, New Year's resolutions. And there's a few things we're going to do differently this year than just like set a bunch of resolutions, which that's actually really weird for me because I've always been the one that's like, I'm going to do this, right? And I'll share on a different podcast what I'm doing this year. So with that being said, some of the other podcasts I was listening to, and I listened to Brian Buffini. He's in one of his coaching organizations where I get coached. He said something really interesting that I wanted to pass on to you guys, that most New Year's resolutions end by the third Thursday in February. Really interesting to think about, because I think of the 100% of Americans, there was a poll done, only 40% last year sent New Year's resolutions. 4 out of 10 people said, hey, I want to change something in my life and I'm going to take action on it. Of the 40%, only like 15% made it past the third Thursday of February. And, I'd be willing to bet a lot of those other people just gave up within a few days, because I think our society is just devolving because we have gotten used to things being too easy. We've gotten used to it being too easy to just go to the grocery store and get food. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. However, we are just as human beings very habitual in everything we do. And just circling back to reframing your New Year's resolutions as day one instead of one day is, I think as we grow and, habit stack and just move forward in life to become a better version of ourselves, the easiest way to stick with our New Year's resolutions, I think, is to constantly be thinking it's day one instead of constantly be thinking, well, one day I'd like to do that. One day I'd like to be financially free. One day I'd like to be fit and healthy. One day I'll eat better. One day I'll track my finances. One day, instead of saying, hey, today's day one, right? You wake up tomorrow, hey, today's day one. And if you mess up tomorrow, you wake up in 2 days and you say, hey, today's day one, right? And I think just as we flex those muscles of whatever we're working on, it could be financially, it could be spiritually, just growing, physically, fitness, anything that we're working on. I think if we adopt the mentality of day one, it's day one instead of one day I'll do X, then you will grow beyond what you could even have dreamt was possible. And it kind of gets back to this philosophy of micro improvements. So if every day, rather than, trying to drastically change your diet or your finances or whatever you're trying to change, if you just make a 1% improvement, I think Tony Robbins describes it as a 2 millimeter shift. But if you just improve 1% today, like how hard is it if you think financially? Hey, I'm going to improve 1% today. So what's 1%? Well, if you think about it, let's say you make $10,000 a month. 1% is $10. Well, how can you save $10 today, right? And you can figure, hey, I can not eat lunch or not eat out for lunch is probably a better way. I'm not advocating skipping meals yet. If we, like today, the lunch I had was leftovers from a roast I did 2 days ago. And, that saved me $15 by not going out to eat. Or if I DoorDashed something, it would have saved me $30, right? So just thinking like, hey, if I can improve 1% in whatever area you're focusing on, and you just focus on that today, that will actually compound and you will improve whatever you're trying to improve by 38% in a year. So if you want to talk about compounding wealth, compounding health, compounding just life satisfaction, everyone I've ever talked to, it's been over decades, not days. Rob Dyrdek, which I really look up to. I grew up watching Rob and Big and Fantasy Factory, and just like, he's always kind of been like larger than life, right? And then he came out with Ridiculousness, and I just like the guy in general. Plus, he's a family man, he's a businessman, he's got all this other stuff going for him. Yet his days are so structured and so optimized, and he's constantly trying to just get better and better. And there was actually one day a couple weeks ago where I was shoveling snow in our driveway because we had a decent snowstorm. And I listened to 2 podcasts. One of them was Bigger Pockets podcast, and Rob Dyrdek was the guest. And then without knowing it, it was the craziest thing, an Ed Milet podcast was like next in my queue, however that works. And Rob Dyrdek was the guest on the Ed Milet podcast. So I was like, man, like crazy. And he was talking about the same thing, but just different, right? So, which is why I love podcasts, by the way. But yeah, so with that being said, I didn't want to take up a whole ton of time on this episode. What I did want to talk about, though, was just reframing your 1 days and making it a day one. Because if you never have a day one, you will pass away one day with a bunch of 1 days. And it sounds a little weird saying it, but it is what it is, I guess. You guys get what I'm trying to say, right? Like, live intentionally. Obviously, you want to live in a manner that like you're not just living for today, because I think that's foolish. So the Bible says, in the house of the wise are stores of choice food and oil, but a foolish man devours all he has. And I think in our lives, both financially and with food, like fitness, health, prosperity, if you look at everything, right, that we measure and track and want to get better at and grow, there's 2 types of people. Somebody that understands we have a finite amount of time. And their relationship with time is that, of course they want to get more done. They want to do more things. They want to have more stuff, but they realize like they can't do everything. And, just wrapping this up, day one or one day, there's a lot of stuff that as business owners, and if you don't own a business, like, Robert Kiyosaki says you need to mind your own business. Like we all own a business, and that business might be you incorporated, which is like, the revenue that you bring in is your paycheck, right? And then you bring that in, and you incorporated has to make decisions financially, whether it's with your spouse or not, but just of how you're going to spend that money, where you're going to live, the car you're going to drive. All of these things, right, are your business, your life. You need to make all these decisions. And, at the end of the day, I think we need to be prudent. And, we can't save everything we make. We also can't spend everything we make. So, it's got to be well balanced, and you've got to live a life that you'd be okay putting your stamp of approval on if it turns out to be your time. And, I don't say that for really anyone listening, just more for myself as I think back. Last night I was scrolling on Instagram, which I probably shouldn't have been. I probably should have been reading the book that has been sitting on my nightstand for a little while that Court got me for Christmas, but it's mindless, and we all kind of do it. So anyways, I found out that Ken Block died, founder of DC Shoes. He just has all these tremendous achievements in his life, and he's a dad and a husband, and he's just got so much going for him. And he was relatively young. I mean, he's like 54 years old, and he passed away snowmobiling. And because we are, it is January 3rd. We're having like an amazing, epic week-long storm here where the mountains are just getting pummeled with feet of snow. And he was out doing one thing that he loved. And I think that, we need to balance that with also making sure that we're planning for the future, because we don't know how long we're going to live. And, just being prudent on, enjoying life, but also, setting ourselves up to really enjoy life later, and, have to worry and stress less and less about money. And it will always be there. That concern will always be there. Sometimes it might just have a zero behind it. But really, I mean, money just happens to be a currency that we have to deal with in this life. And with that being said, guys, I know I've kind of rambled on. Really, the point I wanted to make, and with just some other thoughts of mine, is you can choose to say one day, or you can choose to say it's day one. And with that being said, I'm signing off. Thank you for joining me for another episode of The Financially Free Investor. If you found value in this episode or know someone who would find value in this information, please share with them, subscribe, and send us a review.